All right, let's get started. You guys are in. Press start. Okay. UX and development playing nicely. That's the name of this session. I'm Jess Hang, and just a little bit about my background. I have a degree in computer science. I was a web developer for 4 years before doing Drupal development for 2 years, and now I'm a UX strategist. And here we have Sarah.
I'm Sarah Thrasher. I've been working for Rock Creek for 2 years. I'm a front-end developer and site builder.
And Michelle.
And I'm Michelle Chin. I'm a UX strategist at Rock Creek, and I come from a design background and quality assurance testing background.
I'm Andrew Wacholtz, UX strategist at Rock Creek, and I have about 11 plus years in the online industry, from creative direction all the way through implementation, and now my emphasis is UX.
Cool. So just a little bit about Rock Creek. So it was started in like 1987 maybe as like a branding marketing firm that did like visual design. And as you know, the web sort of developed, branding moved into the web, and you know, these cross-functional teams were introduced. But you know how these teams traditionally worked were, you know, a designer would create an artifact and pass it along to the next team, and that's, you know, working in these silos. And what we learned is, you know, that doesn't really work well or very well. And so what we're going to talk to you guys about today is how we got UX and development to start playing nicely together, and what that meant was changing this process rather than creating artifacts and passing them along. We're working together. And so that's what this presentation is going to be about. First, we're going to go over concepts, and then we're going to go over some, like, how to facilitate these methods. We're going to go over some some hurdles. Andrew's going to go over some hurdles with you guys, and it's been challenging, but we've definitely had some successes. So Michelle's going to go over some successes with you guys. So let's start. Okay. So our mission, especially, you know, as a team, is to build the thing that people want to use. At Rock Creek, that's CMSs and websites, and so likely for you guys too, that's the same. And we use Drupal as well. So that's our mission here. And go over some concepts. So like I said before, at Rock Creek we have these cross-functional teams now, and in this kind of game we're playing, like building the thing that people want to use, we have different characters in this game. And you know, the client is definitely one, the project manager is one, the visual design team, UX strategists, and then the development team. But each character in this game kind of has their own missions and goals. And like the client, for example, they want us to build what they say they want. Project managers, they want us to build something that is within the time, budget, and scope of the project. The visual designers want to design something that's aesthetically pleasing, but not, you know, creating something that's functional and solves problems, but doesn't sacrifice design in doing that. The UX strategists here, we want to build something that's intuitive and something that people want to use. And then our development team wants to use current technology to code something that solves problems. So each player in this game has their own sort of goals that they want to achieve while building this thing that people want to use. So how do we get on the same page and build the thing that people want to use? It involves every team member knowing, having some common knowledge. So in Mario Kart, each driver needs to know how to drive, obviously, to play this game. But each player also has its own strength. So like Koopa, he usually gets the green turtle shell a lot, so that's his little device. Yoshi uses an egg more commonly than not. And you know, in building websites, each person, it's important that they know their own strengths as well as everyone else's. So for me at least, I feel like I know about development, and that brings a certain aspect to the table that's helpful, so I can go to Sarah or a back-end development team and say, hey, I think the client wants something that could be a problem, is that okay? Or with the visual design team, hey, they don't want this element in the top header anymore, can we still bring focus to it elsewhere? So knowing my role and knowing everyone else's role is really important. Second one, project scope. So, we need to know what the scope of this project is, like what are the problems we're trying to solve, and why are we building this thing, so that we stay focused, basically. And then lastly, we need to get out of our comfort zone. So working in cross-functional teams isn't easy, like Andrew will tell you guys about, but it involves kind of getting out of your comfort zone and exploring other areas, whether it's development or design or UX, whatever your skill strength might be. And doing this, I think doing these three things can really help with communication and collaboration. So another thing that's kind of important is knowing the environment in which we're working. And I'm not talking about Drupal while that is important. It's more about what is the method in which we're working. So if you're going to go in Mario's underwater level, you probably need to know that so that you wear this frog suit. So similarly, team members need to know just the process. So at Rock Creek, it's not waterfall and it's not agile. So we're not moving like straight from requirements, sign off, over to design, finish that, and move over. And it's not completely agile where we have like short development sprints and work collaboratively and iteratively and stuff. It's what we call Wagile, and it's this combination of both. So we are, doing this kind of waterfall approach where yes, we need sign off. I mean, we're working with these government clients, we need sign off, but the process to get there is we use agile methods, and so that means like teamwork, collaboration, and process adaptability. So, if we're in the development phase and all of a sudden we look at the content and the client just, it just doesn't match, at that point we really do need to go back. So we're not just pushing forward the way the waterfall model would work. And so lastly, which is really important, is each team member has to be engaged throughout the process so that there's better communication, so that everyone's engaged and knows what's going on with the project. And Sarah's going to talk to you about facilitation.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. When you start a project, a lot of times we're thinking about back to projects that haven't gone so well. And we want to prevent that from happening on this new project. It's going to be great. Everyone is going to love what we build. So sometimes we get really wrapped up in a lot of process. Process can be a lot of things. As if you're in like a waterfall kind of methodology, it may involve lots of timelines way out in the future. It'll be great. We're going to do strategy. We're going to have like all this UX stuff, wireframe, do some designs, and then you wind up with like 2 weeks left to build a website. So it's kind of from a good place, trying to keep things within scope. But sometimes process gets in the way of actually talking to each other. And it holds you up from actually being creative, from solving the problems that you were hired to solve. And also, just naturally our willingness to work with each other and cooperate. What? Technologist. I'm apologizing for these slides. One of the things that's really important when you're communicating is to actually use terminology that the rest of the members of your team understand, and also your clients. We can get caught up with a certain amount of technobabble. Especially as Drupalers, we may be talking about blocks, views, nodes, a lot of terminology that we're used to using with each other that maybe like your UX team won't necessarily understand in the same way, or your designers may also be using in a different way. Some of this is about context. For instance, like blocks have a really specific terminology to a Drupal person. but your designer may be thinking of that as just like an area of specific design. Modules could be functionality that you're using to add to your site, which is very specific in Drupal, but there are other places where, for instance, like SMAX, the CSS process, uses modules to mean little pieces of design. It's like a valid meaning for the word, but when you're using it, people may have like a totally different understanding. For instance, I was in a meeting once where we were talking about templates, and if you've done like HTML work, you may have used Dreamweaver templates where you have like the entire page, and you just fill in content here, here, and here. And one of the other members of the team, we were doing like a design refresh, was like, how many templates do we need? Could we just count the ones in the old theme? And I'm like, templates are actually little files that create markup around your variables. There's going to be like hundreds of thousands. We're not, they're talking about the page layout. So it's just important sometimes to make sure that people are actually understanding what you're saying and they're not just nodding along. Okay. Advance that too far. One of the other things that we've been doing a lot of in an effort to both get on the same page and communicate and work together as more of a team is become more actually cross-functionally skilled. So, for instance, when we're working together, sometimes the UX people will do HTML and CSS. Sometimes our designers will take a look at PHP. I've been doing a little bit of like UX testing. So sometimes we train each other. We like to do actually sessions where the different teams will present to one another. So strategy will get together and talk to us about branding. UX talks to us about mobile wireframing. We'll give them presentations on like HTML basics. And it makes everybody stronger at doing their specific area because you understand more where you fit in with the rest of the team. And it also makes it easier to plan because you're more familiar with the entire picture of what you're working on.
I have a question.
Oh.
So when you're doing cross training, so you can slow the other person down, right?
Well, sometimes it's during like lunches or after work that we do that. Sometimes it's just something that you need to know about to work on the project. And we don't usually go that far out of our actual skill sets, but it's definitely like helpful sometimes. I mean, you got to know like what goes into a website to understand how to plan for it. One of the other things that we all like to do together is we get together for like sketching and planning sessions, brainstorming, and in this we try to keep this lo-fi, paper, post-it notes, whiteboards. Everybody can do this. Sometimes when you're trying to explain something to somebody, it's easier just to draw it out. Hand gestures don't necessarily get across what you're trying to say, but sometimes it's just, all right, here it's a button, and we got this thing, We've even got like a few like whiteboard walls in the office, so it's good to get together and actually like sketch out what you're talking about.
Do you use any wireframing tools in this process? Just like some simple ones like Balsamic or something along those lines?
We do use things like OmniGraffle, but there's like the lo-fi usually leads into a certain amount of like more high fidelity ones. Also, we've also been, aside from just making like wireframe, working on, this is not good, doing digital prototypes. And for us, like, this is, the wireframes tend to be like, kind of like a spec doc as well. You got like, okay, this here piece does this here piece does this, annotations and whatnot. But as we're doing more responsive sites, you don't want to wind up doing a wireframe for every single different breakpoint you might be addressing. So the digital prototyping is like you have like your lo-fi, planning it out, getting all your ideas out. Definitely some amount of like actual like wireframes. Usually that's the desktop version of the site. And then the digital prototype is the wireframes in HTML and CSS. And we've been working on building those together. This is why we're doing a lot of this cross-training. Sometimes I'll be building a prototype or one of the other developers. Sometimes our UX team actually builds an HTML and CSS and does the wireframe as HTML, and we actually use that to test with our clients. So we've done like user testing where we've got recording software hooked up to the screen, and we'll take test users,
Yeah.
and we'll give them tasks to do on the site, and we'll actually watch how they interact with it, see if they can find the thing that we were hoping they would find, and then we'll gather together that data and we'll actually refine the prototypes based on it. So it's not replacing wireframes, it's really supplementing them. And it's also something that we take to reference later when we're in the development process. Sometimes we also will do this straight in Drupal. Sometimes it's really fast just to make something in Drupal and work with it there, and that can actually lead into being an actual starter site. Some of the things that we've been using to create the digital prototypes. Zurb Foundation is a CSS framework. It's got a lot of pieces built into it, so you're not having to create a lot of this stuff from scratch. There's like buttons, forms, little like sales widgets, menus. So you can just take those things and arrange them like you would be doing in OmniGraffle or Photoshop or Illustrator, whatever you use for your wireframes. But it's like pretty much simple copy and paste, and it's already styled. So you pretty much got a real working website that you can use to demonstrate your ideas. Twitter Bootstrap's a pretty similar thing. A lot of people do actually use Zurb and Bootstrap as the foundation for their finished site. And if you're doing this in Drupal, there's even themes that use these as their layout and styling. They're like base themes, but you could actually take like static HTML, copy some of that stuff into your Drupal theme, and that would be the basis of your site that you're working on. There's another cool thing that Forum 1 put together called Prody that is a lot like one of these like web-based Islamic kind of things, but it's a Firefox plugin, and it creates an actual responsive website that you could export and toy around with as static HTML as well. And it's got the same thing like buttons, form elements, lists, and things that you can just drag and drop into it. And it also has a few little skins. So if you want to change the way that the wireframe looks, you can just use a drop-down and change the visual appearance of it. And one other thing that's not actually on this list that we've been doing occasionally, depending on what we need to put out, is we'll make like a clickable PDF, or even just use like pings, HTML, and maybe a little bit of like positioning to put links on it. It's all about what we're trying to test when we're working on this. Oh, maybe it isn't there. Okay. And then this is we're talking. We all get together and work on these together. Sometimes we'll go off and do a little bit of refinement, but for the most part, we'll be sitting there with our computers next to each other, brainstorming, talking about technologies we're planning on using, looking over the specs, dragging in coworkers to test things on. This is usually where we'll be dragging in design to have a look at things. And we've been finding this really valuable to like get ideas out there, make sure everybody's on the same page as far as the project goes. And we're not as surprised when we do this. Like later in, it's not like there's just a handoff, okay, you're ready, go ahead, build. Especially as a developer, I think it's been really helpful to be brought in earlier, have an input on what's going into the site, and not just have to build something that somebody went off in a corner, worked on, you know, like a monk, and then just handed to me. But it's not all Candyland.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm going to talk a little bit about the hurdles of the process. And I've been to a lot of talks where people come up and they say, oh, just do this, do prototyping, do rapid sketching, everything's great, you know, it's rainbows and unicorns. And I'm like, yeah, that's a bunch of BS, because what's the reality of your world? No one's going to walk in the door and go, oh, you got a new process? Great. Go nuts. I'll see you guys later. That does not happen. And one of the things that we talk a lot about when we start any new process, or one of the things that we started to do when we went through into this, was burying the hatchet. Yes, we've all had shit projects in the past. We've all had bad experiences with developers, with UX, with designers, with clients. But anytime you're going to try something new, you got to be able to look back at what has happened, and you have to let it go, let it ride. You also need to be able to look at what you could have done better in the situation. What would you have liked to have improved on? And this is, again, more your reflection of what it is you're going to be doing moving forward in this new process. One of the things that you need to take into consideration, though, and even I'm guilty of this, is when I've gotten the reflection of things and said, oh, well, this could have been done better, this could have been done better in this, I'm always pointing the finger at everyone else. And I need to make sure that I'm pointing the finger back at myself going, even though I was a part of the project, I feel that I did what it is was right, I probably did something wrong that probably ticked off Sarah. Developers like, yeah, thanks a lot, UX, you screwed us over on that one, bravo. And you got to make sure that you're really assessing everything around you before you start putting blame on other things. And again, that's all part of burying the hatchet. Just let it get behind you, move on. The next part that we like to do with our projects is we want to air our grievances. And this actually involves the entire team. We get everybody that's on the team, like it would be Sarah, myself, let's just say we all get into a room. We bring in the project manager. Hell, maybe we even bring in the person who sold the project off to the client. And then we have what is commonly known as a come to Jesus meeting, to where everything gets laid out onto the table. And the reason for this is this: if you don't explain to other members of your team what your experiences you've had in the past, how they've impacted you, maybe how it's even impacted your work, they're not going to understand how you operate. And this is also a time to start to point things out, such as when I had done this, this happened over here, and it affected my workflow in this manner. So a part of building a team and getting UX and development to play nicely together is coming to Jesus, airing grievances, telling things. And Sarah and I sat down. I knew that I had some beefs with developers. She had some beefs with UX. Matter of one of them, which I'm guilty of, is I'm blindly walking in to talk to the client. I'm like, I'll promise you $1 million piece right here. I walk back to Sarah and I go, $1 million, build it. And she's like, yeah, 2 weeks, thanks a lot. And so I'm guilty, of clogging the process just as much as anybody. But this is all a part of building the team trust and letting everybody know where they're all sitting. The next phase of this, after everybody's aired grievances, you need to sit down and you need to talk about the reality of the situation. And you need to acknowledge the logistics of the project itself. What's on paper? What's being promised? What are the deadlines? And much like the old man in Zelda, it's dangerous to go alone, the idea here is you don't want to go rogue. You don't want to be UX going, well, here's a problem right here. I'm going to run off. I'm going to take care of it, no problem. Let your team in on it. Maybe Sarah, she came to me one time and said, okay, we've got these mobile prototypes you need to build. I go, yeah, it's going to take me a ton of time. It's going to be a waste of my time, as a matter of fact, I believe. She says, well, I've always wanted to do a prototype digitally. You ever heard of Zerb? I'm like, no clue. What's Zerb? Is that a new video game? And she's like, no, it's a great prototyping tool. I was like, okay, I don't know code. I know enough to be dangerous, but I can't program. She goes, you know CSS? I go, scale of 1 to 10, a 5. She goes, you can do it, no problem. And I'm like, all right, well, let's do it. So that's exactly what we did. We sat down, started to look at some things, and we built that team trust and that relationship. And we also started in the process of that, acknowledging the problems that we were having with the contract itself. And when you're sitting down and you want to talk about the logistics, you want to make sure that you're talking as a team about the hurdles. Again, when Sarah and I did that prototype, I had a hurdle. I had a lot of prototypes that I had to supposedly draw out. Problem is, we already started to max out what we were supposed to hand off to the client. So I had, a massive website and maybe 4 responsive prototype designs on paper to do. Yeah, that's going to go over very well. So we overcame our hurdle. She said digital prototype, we can submit it as one item, and it had multiple pages. I think we had 36 pages on that thing. And it went over really well. Along with acknowledging the logistics of everything, we wanted to talk about the project desires. Specifically, how far that we wanted to go individually in the project itself. You know, do you want to start climbing walls? Do you want to start whipping out your sword? Do you want to start jumping over buildings? Well, the question is, can you? Or is it even going to be allowable in the project? You know, if development wants to do a certain build, well, how is that going to impact UX? If UX wants to build something out, well, design, how are they going to be able to respond in kind of the, you know, all of the development that they need to do, all of the design components, the color, and the branding. So you want to be able to talk really well about where you want to go with this. I'm of the mindset that I want to improve myself 1% every day. So when I go into a project, even though it looks like a total CF, I keep an open mind and I go, okay, there's probably some jewels in here somewhere. What can I do? How can we push it? And I do that because I want to improve myself, but I also want to help with the team. And one of the ways that we do that is, or one of the ways you can do that, is an exercise that we call like priority plotting. And I'm sure maybe a lot of you have seen something that's kind of similar to this. Really, really simple exercise you can do with everybody in the team. It's simply, there's a level of importance, required, nice to have. Feasibility, is it easy or is it going to be hard? So one of the things that we look at, a Facebook like button. Development says, yeah, just throw it on the page, we're good to go. Design goes, can't do anything, Facebook's got their logo. UX is like, whatever, you can put it wherever you want, we don't care, it fits. All right, super easy, but it's not, it's nice to have, it's not required. The other thing is, let's look at maybe a calendar of events. So the client maybe puts on a lot, it's like a meetup. Well, that's kind of important, so it kind of slides over or down towards the required area, but it's a little bit harder to do. There's a lot of development and build involved. So going into another one, shopping cart. That slides even further over in the feasibility because there's a lot involved in a shopping cart. And then say like a web contact form. And this area right down here is what I like to consider the sweet spot, the low-hanging fruit. This area, when you start to see a lot of things building up in here, that's where your team can tackle quite a bit of items really quickly and in a short period of time. Again, this is all part of just plotting some things out. So this is one of the exercises that we do with UX dev. Actually, we bring everybody together and have a good time. And nothing actually is left off the table. Everything goes up there, ideas, anything you want to do. So as much brainstorming as possible is a good thing. So there's two projects I want to just point out, or processes of how this hurdles and we overcame them. This example right here was a approach to collaboration. And the idea was, novel concept, how about UX and dev get together from the very beginning and we collaborate. And project management sat back and said, well, I don't really know if that's going to be possible. I'm like, Sarah's literally a door away, why can't I talk to her? And then, well, this is how we've traditionally done some things. So it's always been like Excitebike. Here's UX, here's dev. We're on the same path. We're doing our own thing, but we're not actually really communicating because there's so many obstacles that we're trying to pay attention to. So our proposal was more Rad Racer style. We said, hey, I got an idea. How about Sarah and Andrew get into a sweet ride and we head down a smooth road and we're all going in the same direction. We want to get to the finish line. Guess what? While we're driving, she can be the radio pirate. I can switch. I can be the radio pirate. We're communicating. Crazy idea. What do you think? And again, they can get a little pushback on us. But the thing is, the reason the pushback is they right away saw there was a lot of hours being chewed up right away. Why? Because now you have more than just one person working on a project. Now you have to respect that. You can't just look at it and go, well, they're the person who's time crunching the bean counters, they're just pissing me off. They don't know what it's like to really create. They're just managing stuff. Well, no, you got to respect what it is that their job is. And that's where we had to actually sell this process. And it was a baby step. We said, tell you what, let us collaborate and we'll kind of show you how it went. So this was just one example of, again, a hurdle we had to overcome. And they actually saw the benefits of it, because I, as a UXer, was not going to see development hurdles that Sarah clearly was going to see down the road. I was sitting there creating beautiful pictures for everyone, not realizing that there was a bigger database issue that Sarah's like, what is this for? Oh, well, that's for that. Yeah, that's a pretty big problem. Oh, do I need a wireframe for that? Yeah, you do. So the next hurdle, as example, is digital wireframes. Traditionally, we've done things in Onographle, paper, lines, hand it off to a client. Client looks at it, sees a lot of words, match up numbers to a dot on there. Oh, 1 to 1, and there's a lot of text. I don't really care what that is. And then they come back and go, oh, by the way, I need this on this wireframe. I go, it's right there. It's number 3. Oh, I didn't see that. Well, of course you didn't. You're a client. You didn't read it. I mean, that's classic. So one of the things we wanted to do was we said, well, wait a sec. There's got to be a better way. This is how we've traditionally been handing off wireframes. This is what the client sees. They're like 8-bit, shoot gun, Atari 2600. That's all. That's their mindset when they get these wireframes. We said, let's do a digital prototype because we want them to actually see something that looks more like this. Because this is what really is what we're trying to explain to them. Again, we had to sell the concept to our internal team. We had to build a prototype. I think we did it on our own at lunch later in the evening. And then we pitched it internally, and they said, wow, that's really cool. Like, yeah, it's responsive. We ended up bringing this, thank God, not this to the client. Showed it to them, mind blown. Immediately, they were pointing things out like, oh, I can slide this and that moves down here? Yeah. Oh, we don't want that moving that down there. Oh, well, you didn't tell us that before. Yeah, because we didn't know what it was going to do. Oh, well, there you go. Now you can see it. And this was a huge win because immediately the client started to understand how this actually was going to work online. So we were really happy. The client was really happy. And so now this is beginning to be more of an adopted process, the early collaboration, the digital prototyping, because we and the clients are beginning to see those benefits. And again, this went over great with the client. And I'm going to hand it off to Michelle, and she's going to talk to you a little bit more about some of the other success stories we've had.
Okay. So I'll go into some of the triumphs, but first you have to ask yourself, but why is it worth it? Why is it worth going through all these hurdles that Andrew mentioned? You know, talking to people and airing grievances. Isn't it just easier to put your headphones on, sit at your computer all day, and code and ignore the rest of the world and just do your thing? Yeah, it is. You know, the hurdles aren't easy. It's just like when you played Super Mario and you worked really hard, died 5 times, finally mastered the level, and all of a sudden find out the princess is in another castle. You're like, do I really want to continue? Because this was kind of exhausting. And the answer is yeah, you do want to continue. And there are some good triumphs you can get out of collaborating like this. The first one is early engagement. So everyone's on the same page early on. So there's no more waiting for UX to do wireframes, to pass it to design to make an interface, and then for it to come across your inbox to program. And right away, everyone has a say at the beginning. So as a developer, you can say, well, you know, this UX module, or when a UXer goes, can we do this module? Say, you know, that's kind of tricky. We might want to go this route. And so, you know, that's really great for the team. But everyone wants to know, you know, what's in it for me? Why should I spend the extra effort to make this collaboration work? Like, I want to know what I'm getting out of it. And there are some wins for developers. So some of the earlier wins is that you get to weigh in your options early on. So you can say, hey, you know, I could do route A, and it's going to take this much time and effort, or route B, which is going to be quicker, but I need more people. And so you're no longer waiting till 11th hour to say, you know, this is really impossible. I kind of want to get some sleep tonight. I don't want to drink 5 Red Bulls. You know, why didn't you come to me earlier? So there's no more of that. Another thing is you can ask questions. So as the UXer is creating things on the fly with a digital prototype, you can ask them, what do you mean by this? How does this interaction work? And you can say, when I click here, I don't really understand where this is going. Wouldn't it be better if it went this way? So there's more collaboration involved. And a really big win is that there's no more wireframes to interpret, no more pieces of paper to print out that are half cut off, no more matching dots with captions, with insets, and going, what do you mean I have to flip to page 42? I don't understand what this is doing. So one of the developers, when I was doing a digital prototype, came up to me and said, wow, I really love the digital prototype because I know when I click on this link, I'm taken to this page and I know how to code that. For UXers, there's also wins as well. So there's a better means of communication among your team, which means that they understand things quickly. Like you can show interactions and they get it right off the bat. And you don't have to work hard on creating wireframes anymore that people don't understand or have trouble understanding. And earlier, you can figure out the feasibility early on. You can talk to some Drupal people and say, hey, is this going to work? Or, what about this? There's also team wins. So the first team win is that you have a digital prototype that you can reference throughout the project. And it's a tangible thing where you know how to click and how it's going to function, and you can always refer back to it. And there's another win. It's an external win with a client. So digital prototypes, like Andrew mentioned, are closer to the real thing. So no longer do the clients have to scratch their heads going, I don't understand what this inset means. Is that a rollover? Do I click on that? Like, how does that work? With a digital prototype, they can click or they can roll over and see how the interaction actually works. And with that, they can actually speak to the changes that they want to see instead of going, well, I think in your wireframe you mean this, so I want it to be changed like this. They have a clearer understanding of what's going on. And lastly, there's kinesthetic learning. So everyone, because they're all dabbling in anything, like what Sarah mentioned with the cross-training, is that everyone gets a better understanding. So when I'm doing the HTML for the digital prototype, I have a better idea of how websites are built by developers. What was really helpful for me is that when we used Foundation to do our digital prototype, it was responsive. So from a coding standpoint, I got a better understanding of how the grid system worked, which helped me with when I do sketches for wireframes. And lastly, there's a huge win of team agility. So a client, as you know, is probably going to want changes, and since everyone is already on the same page throughout, they are in a better position to make those changes quickly. They don't all have to wait for UX to do stuff, for design to refix stuff, and for dev to program. Everyone can just jump in, know what they have to do, make the changes, and get it done. And so we've had a couple projects that have done this approach, and one of them is USAID. So over a year ago, USAID relaunched their website, and they did it with a traditional established approach. It wasn't easy for our team or the client. There was a lot of rehashing back and forth, misunderstandings of concepts and stuff. So for the second phase, for the redesign of the country pages, we said, hey, can we try this digital prototype approach? Would you guys be open for it? We think it might be a little bit easier for everyone. And they were up for it, but then again, you never know how a client is really going to understand things or take things. So this is a screenshot of the digital prototype done in Foundation. And you kind of see the blocks that we had and the content that they were going to have in certain areas. So we showed this to the client. We clicked around. They kind of nod their heads. They were quiet about it. So we asked them, what are your initial thoughts? And right away they said, wow, can we sign off on this right now? And we were like, sure, if you want, but you might want to think about it a little bit. But that was a huge win for us because it's right away they understood what their website was pretty much going to look like. They understood what happens when you're going to click here and where you're going to go. They got it really early on, and that was really huge for us. And it did take a while to establish this process to gain the trust of our internal team members as well as the client. And because we've been successful, more and more of our projects are going with this approach. So we have a couple takeaways from our presentation. The first one is communication is key. Communicating early and communicating often is huge in order to get this collaboration to be working. Early collaboration, so the earlier you can get your team members on board, the better it will be. Where developers can work with UXers and hash out some ideas and sketch them like Sarah had mentioned earlier. And another big thing is to balance your own wants. So as Andrew had mentioned, we all will come in wanting to do different things, and we have to kind of figure out and compromise what's going to be feasible, what we want to do, and keep expectations realistic. Putting this approach into our workflow wasn't easy. We just, it's not like we walked in there one day saying, hey, we're going to do digital prototyping and everyone's going to be happy and we're all going to work at the same time. So we kept our expectations realistic, and it did take a lot of effort. And we worked bit by bit. We had to convince the project manager that this was something that would be beneficial in the end. We took baby steps. This didn't happen overnight, and it did take a lot of work. And in the end, we just want you to know that it is worth it. It's been really successful for our other clients and future projects that we're working on. We've had a great deal of success with it, and it is really worth it. If it wasn't worth it, we wouldn't be sharing this approach with you. So that's that. And if anyone has any questions, we'd be happy to answer any questions with the time we have left over. We also have a couple computers that have our digital prototype demo if you guys would like to play around with that. But yeah, does anyone have any questions?
We should have seen the before and after. I'm sure it looks pretty good.
Oh,
Pretty spot on, right?
pretty similar. You can go to USAID to your countries. Yes.
How much of your prototype, like some of the workings behind it, make it over to production? Like, let's say, are you using Foundation for your production sites for some of them, and like, are you doing anything like where you're maybe sharing like SAS or like SMAX type stuff between them to try to cut down on work, doubling up on work?
We haven't actually used Foundation on a production site. Like, mostly Foundation is cool because it's got all these little components, so you're not like
Right.
hand coding anything really. I mean, occasionally we'll grab something from a site that we just like a specific element. Usually it's just plugging things in where they belong and maybe tweaking the content.
Okay.
But we definitely do use SMAX approach with our like as much reusable modular CSS as possible. Block class and things like that to just throw
Mhm.
classes on and get as much styling there, you know, not like trying to target like block IDs and things. But like USAID, for example, is built in Omega, so there's no way Foundation would have worked out as like a. So that was kind of like a throwaway like HTML static prototype, but I think it's a good. Like I don't think that would be a bad way to work, and a lot of times our designers will even do like CSS, so like we'll get like a static HTML thing with the design stuff in it. So I think that would be a good area to like.
Right on.
Mel.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Do you guys give them like an environment to mess around with digital prototyping, or do you have like a very controlled demo where you kind of show the
For the one that we had done, that I had talked a little bit about, that was just a straight up throwaway, as Sarah likes to call it, responsive. And at least with the approach that I talked about, that was the first time that we had done it. So, and actually, per your question, one of the things that Sarah had talked about, and we even had a little discussion amongst the development team with myself in there, was how can we leverage this to add value, continue down the road into the project. I foresee that could definitely be a part of it in the future. But for the one that I talked about, it was just simply here's a 32 kind of straight up hard code throwaway.
We did actually, once it was finished, set it up on like a staging site and give out the link, and we did like a pretty extensive user test, like an A/B test on we actually had like one version where things were like over here and one where they were over here to like help
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, well, actually, what I used was in the testing, there were two. One thing, we actually used this camera, sat it up, watched these, so we can get more of a contextual inquiry as to how they're viscerally behaving. The other part was I used Camtasia. It's just a software that you just record the screen. And what it also was doing was recording through the camera, so that we were getting a facial view, a side view, and getting all the movement on the screen. And surprisingly, I think we got like 16 people, which was more than enough to be able to understand how they're operating. But in terms of like testing with a responsive or with a digital prototype, there's so much more information you can get if you're able to record their motions and actions.
Something you could not do with a wireframe.
Yeah, a wireframe is like point. Okay, that's great. Any other questions?
Was there any like numbers that came out at the end after its comparisons based on how your agile like team worked compared to the old way of doing things? Like look, you can see here that by this numbers like it actually wasn't as bad as you thought. Like, was there do you have any kind of like metrics on that, or roughly, or?
There wasn't any quantitative that we were able to really record. It was more of a qualitative data point. A lot of it was one of the big things we were testing was the navigation structure, and essentially kind of is are they even understanding what these things are meaning and what things would be found underneath. But a lot of it was also we were asking them to respond as they were kind of talk aloud as they were going through it. So No, we didn't get quantitative, but we got enough qualitative that we went back to the client, presented it, and the client said, oh yeah, that was a bad idea when we were going to do that. So maybe we should change it according to the tests.
We were definitely starting to hit our head against the wall doing like just wireframes for everything and going into mobile and tablet versions of the site because there was never time to actually do wireframes and comps for all the different like sizes. Like that's just, I don't think anybody is doing that because it's just too much of a lift. And like this is definitely faster when you're including different layouts and devices.
Yeah, by far.
Anyone else? Well, all right, thanks for coming to our session. If you have any questions, we'll be around. Thank you.